Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the world. As many of you know already, I'm Zach Jones. Welcome back to my channel, but if you're new to my channel, then welcome. Now, I've only got one more PowerPoint to do to remaster after this one, but before I do the remaster 10 Big Cats of the World, I've decided to offer you all a little enticing treat. I'm remastering my PowerPoint on dinosaurs that not many people know, that many people don't know about. I will be including some famous dinosaurs as well as some that have only recently been discovered. And I'm going to start with my favourite one, Velociraptor. Now, Velociraptors were theropod dinosaurs. The theropod dinosaurs were the dinosaurs with 3 toes. And of course, they were pack hunters, and they lived in the Mongolian desert about 80 to 65 million years ago. Now, of course, the movies like Jurassic Park have always made velociraptors about 2 meters tall, about as tall as a fully grown human, and scaly. But in actual fact, Velociraptor was only about the size of a giant turkey at 2 meters long, but they also had a ferocious killing claw on the first toe of each foot that they used for killing and quite possibly even climbing. The fossil records have always shown us that velociraptors lived in packs, but also another thing that the movies left out about them is that they might have had feathers. As I was saying, the fossil records have always shown that velociraptors live in packs. Of course, we know that from guessing because in the fossil records, velociraptor skeletons are always found together. Now, velociraptors, they might have been small, but what they lacked in size, they made up for in intelligence. Because the brain cavity of the velociraptor was very, very big. It probably took up about 1/8 of the skull, so they had incredible intelligence. And of course, fossil studies in the early 2000s showed that they also had, probably had a resonating chamber, which also allowed them to communicate with each other, so they could communicate as well as work together as a team and outwit their prey, which made velociraptors probably smarter than whales, dolphins, and even primates. But in the fossil records, it is shown that velociraptors were also formidable predators, because they usually fed on quite small dinosaurs, but the biggest prey they've been known to tackle is this, Protoceratops. Now, Protoceratops are in the ceratopsian group, so the same family as Triceratops. As you can see, they have an enormous frill, and they have a large nodule at the end of their nose that they use to batter their predators and even rivals into submission. And of course, Velociraptor's teeth were too small to bite at their prey's throat like a lion. So what they did was they used those formidable killing claws, just like daggers on the first toes. And of course, for the early years, and even in the Jurassic Park movies, it was suggested that velociraptors used their claws to disembowel their prey, like they probably sliced at the stomach to rip open the intestines. Although recent studies have shown that velociraptors might have more likely used those killing claws to stab at their prey's throat or at the chest to puncture the heart or the jugular vein. Well, they might have done both. I mean, truth is, we may never know. But one revolutionary fossil is this. It is a velociraptor locked in battle with a Protoceratops. And as we can see here, the killing claw of the velociraptor stabbed right into the gut of the Protoceratops, while the Protoceratops gripped the raptor's arm. Of course, no one's entirely sure how these animals died. I mean, it might have been a landslide on a dune in the desert where tons and tons of rainwater was held, and then as the battle raged on, it might have caused a tremor among the dune, and all the sand collapsed on top of them, creating what paleontologists have called Dinosaur Pompeii. And another thing about velociraptors is that we now know that raptors and dinosaurs have more in common with modern-day birds than they do reptiles. Like the pubic bone is shaped a lot like a bird's. The bones are full of air sockets that are very similar to modern birds. And even the name raptor means bird of prey. Of course, no one's entirely sure how long the Velociraptor lived on Earth. I mean, it probably lived right until the end of the Cretaceous period, where the asteroid that hit the Earth 65 million years ago caused the death of the dinosaurs. But I will be talking about that a bit later. Now, for the next dinosaur, which has for many years captured the imagination, as well as a bizarre animal that we've only just managed to reconstruct in the last 30 odd years, it is Spinosaurus. Now, Spinosaurus was part of a group of dinosaurs that called Spinosaurids that were only discovered a few years ago. In fact, this strange group was known because of the elongated snout that was a lot like a crocodile's, and these animals lived in South America, Europe and Asia, but the biggest of them, Spinosaurus, lived in North Africa. And it was only Spinosaurus was first discovered in 1912 when fragments of its enormous skeleton were found in Egypt. And it was a predator with 2-meter long spines arising over its back. And of course, it was only until around the 1990s or 2002 when a fully complete upper jaw was found that we could finally reconstruct this dinosaur. Its skull was about 1.75 meters long, and from nose to tail it was a colossal 17 to 18 meters long, which means it was 4 meters longer than T-Rex, and it was 11 tons in weight. Of course, Spinosaurus lived on Earth in North Africa about 94 million years ago in the mid-Cretaceous. And of course, back then, studies have shown that back then, North Africa was a vast desert surrounding a system of rivers and swamps. And also, a study of their bones and teeth in the mid-2000s actually showed something remarkable. It's that chemical traces in the skeletons have shown that Spinosaurus might have lived more like a crocodile than other land-based dinosaurs. So it was an animal that spent a large part of its life in and around water. And it was a specialist at hunting in water because it was Ichthyophagus, which is a fish eater, and a lot of what it fed on were 8-meter long giant sawfish called Onchopristis. Of course, it's believed that Onchopristis migrated into freshwater rivers to breed, where the young may be safer, but the adults are exposed to new threats, a lot like modern-day salmon. And of course, Spinosaurus actually had a very unique way of hunting these animals, these giant fish, because in 2008, the Spinosaurus's skull was put through a CT scanner, and it revealed a very curious pattern of holes and sinuses in the snout that looked just like those of modern crocodiles. and it's believed that those contained pressure sensors. I mean, sensors that, like a crocodile, can detect its prey from vibrations in the water, and it would have been able to hold its snout in the water because its nostrils were high on its head, and so it could strike without even seeing its prey. But Spinosaurus' teeth were straight and conical, a lot like a crocodile's, so they evolved to grip prey rather than kill. So how it killed its prey was it used its incredibly powerful claws on its long, strong arms. And of course, Spinosaurus might not have just hunted in water, it may have also lived in the water. I mean, the truth is we may never know, but although this animal was a specialist in times of hardship like droughts, so with the rivers drying, its usual food supply disappeared, so that would force the Spinosaurus to hunt on land. And of course, unlike crocodiles that could hibernate during times of hardship, Spinosaurus could not. Because it was an active hunter, its metabolism demanded a regular supply of food. Although it was a specialist, it wasn't confined to the rivers, but hunting on land meant that Spinosaurus was forced into direct competition with any large predators living in the same environment. And of course, there was only one animal that could match it, but I will show you all that one in a bit. Spinosaurus was the last and the largest of the fish-eating dinosaurs, but ultimately these specialists were doomed. In fact, something way beyond their control caused their downfall, because about 94 million years ago, the climate changed. Because global sea levels then began to rise, which flooded the swamps and rivers that Spinosaurus thrived in. And of course, with their loss, their specialism became a vulnerability. And that meant that the biggest predator that has ever walked the earth disappeared. But Spinosaurus wasn't the only giant predator which thrived in North Africa 90 million years ago. There was also... Sorry about this. There was also this guy, Carcharodontosaurus. Now, Carcharodontosaurus was a land-based predator. It was a meat-eater, a carnivore. It was a member of the Carnosaur family. In fact, it's a cousin of Allosaurus, but 4 times bigger. And of course, Carcharodontosaurus lived around the same time as Spinosaurus, but unlike Spinosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus hunted on land. In fact, this animal was about 13 metres long, weighed 7.5 tons, had serrated teeth at about 16 centimetres long, and like Spinosaurus, it too was bigger than T-Rex. Of course, big predators need big hunting grounds, and Carcharodontosaurus may have needed up to 500 square kilometres, which made competition for the best hunting grounds intense. And of course, in many predatory dinosaurs, we find tooth marks and puncture wounds on the skulls, which turn out to be bite marks made by others of their kind. In fact, tooth puncture marks, gouges, and scarring are remarkably common. In fact, such violent head and face biting is believed to have likely been territorial. But Carcharodontosaurus was a very formidable hunter. And of course, it usually might have hunted animals like the duck-billed Ouranosaurus, which are about 7 metres, 3 tons in weight, but also some of the hardest animals to catch. But Carcharodontosaurus is shown that it might have had a secret weapon. because in the 2000s